So it's my pleasure today to have a conversation with Dr. Susan Stryker for the 2021 President's Dream Colloquium and for the 50th anniversary of the Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at Simon Fraser University. Dr. Stryker, thank you so much
It's
for
my
taking
pleasure.
time to
Glad
be
to
with
be
us
here.
today. Before we get going, I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm participating in my part of the conversation from my home, which is located on the unceded territory of the Stolo Nation.
And I am speaking to you from my home on the unceded land of the sovereign Ohlone people.
Thank you for that. So, Dr. Stryker, you have been a prolific creator and curator of knowledge. You are a historian, a philosopher, a writer, an award winning filmmaker, and an advocate for people who have been marginalized by their gender identity and expression. And you're also an academic. Um, so, in your own words, how would you introduce us to your work?
Um, Gosh, you make it sound like I've been doing a lot. But I guess it's true that for really the past 30 years, a lot of my life has revolved around um, around transgender issues broadly defined. Um, Before that, I had done my PhD in U.S. history at the University of California at Berkeley, where I worked on histories of religious identity. And I suppose at some level I've always been interested in what I would call like questions of the historicity of identity, which at some level is it's like it's research, but mostly it's me search. That it's questions about like how does somebody like me, like a trans person, like somebody who's like always felt from earliest childhood like I was not the gender that other people thought I was. It's like how does that happen? What does that mean? Um, and that question I think is at the root of a lot of my questioning, whether it's like a historical question or a philosophical question or a creative or artistic question. That at some level I'm just like trying to make sense of myself and to understand my place in the world and the place of the world of other people who are similar to me in some manner.
Okay, that's really interesting that you bring your research, you so unapologetically ground it in your own experience. And that's a very awesome approach. And I think most researchers do to a certain degree. It's just there's different levels of denial or
Mm-hmm.
acceptance of our place within our own research. So, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for me, that approach really resonates with things that I learned more formally when I read works, mostly by Chicana feminists, people like Gloria Anzaldúa and Cherie Moraga, even though I don't, necessarily agree with some of their positions, right down the line, like this idea of, what they called theory in the flesh really resonates with me that there's some things that we know because of how we live our bodies in the world. It's like we know something because of how the world treats us, because of ways that we might be different from dominant ways of being. It's like because of race, because of sex, and like that sense of how you develop theory, like theory about what the world is like through how you walk around or move around in the world. Developing that theory in the flesh is a really important methodology for feminism, for critical race studies, and I would argue for like trans studies. It's like I know how the world has treated me as a trans person. How do I make sense of that? And when I ask that question, I think it helps open up a perspective on the way that power and knowledge are structured in our society. So it's one methodology among many. It's not
Mhm.
mere subjectivism. That it's not just a kind of narcissism, but it's like saying how I get treated in the world because of the kind of person that I am is an important way to know and can be part of a broader project of not knowledge making and thought and analysis, which is what we who are in the academy do. They call it a knowledge factory, but it's kind of true. It's like we make legitimated forms of knowledge.
Mhm. Okay, which is an interesting thought because I believe you graduated with your PhD in 1992. So
That is
you've been existing in a body over the course of 30 years, and there's been a lot of social change in that time. Do you have any perceptions on how that those changes, how it relates to your experience of being in the world?
um, yeah, and I will say, again, that it's like my feelings of being trans are things that it's like I have memories of into very early childhood. So in a sense, I feel like I've always lived a trans body. It's like I have always lived with a certain awareness of myself, and lived with the consequences of how the world has treated me in ways that sometimes don't support or reflect back what my experience of myself has been. So I would say I've been living a trans body for 60 years at this point. And it's like, yeah, I have certainly seen a lot of change in those 6 decades. Um, as a child, I mean, I knew absolutely nothing about the existence of other people who were like I considered myself to be. Most of the media representations that I saw, in newspapers and television and movies were not positive. Um, you know, transness was presented as kind of a joke or as a monstrosity, and there was just like no sense that there could just be trans people and it was just another way to be in the world. Um, I would say that I don't really like to use the word progress because I think history is far more non-linear than that. But I certainly think some things have gotten better around these issues. That there's more awareness. There's also more violence, I think, directed at trans people, that our visibility kind of paradoxically attracts violence. And yet, there's far more sense of trans community. There's a broader conversation in which, you know, trans is in fact seen as just like another way that somebody can be. I think of it as being kind of left-handed. I am a left-handed person in life, and I kind of think of transness as a kind of gender left-handedness. It's kind of like most people are right-handed, and some people are left-handed, and it's just another way that people can be. And trans is like, well, most people are cis. That there's a certain alignment between their body, their sense of self, what society recognizes, and then there's the left-handed gendered people who are also gendered but just do it a little differently, and it's just another it's just another way to be. So the opportunity for more gender left-handedness without some punitive social response to that, I think that has been a change in the last half century, let's say. I was just finishing up a project. the my first semester, so I guess that would be fall of 2017, was when I wrote the bulk of my book, Transgender History: The Roots of Today's Revolution. Um, but I'll just say that even more than sort of supporting my work while I did a project, that holding the Ruth Wynn Woodward Professorship at Simon Fraser was something that was truly transformative for my career. Um, I mean, well, first of all, I'll just say that I think I've lived in a lot of beautiful places in the world. It's like I spent time in Hawaii growing up. It's like I live in the San Francisco Bay Area now. I've lived in New York and Sydney and Boston for shorter periods of time. And I think Vancouver and the Pacific Northwest is just it's just like one of the most beautiful place I have ever spent. It really, left a piece of my heart there for sure. But more than that, what I would say is that receiving the Ruth Wynn Woodward Professorship was something that conferred a real sense of legitimacy on the work that I had been doing. In my perspective, once I finished the PhD, it's like I work mostly as an independent scholar. Being out as a trans person in 1992, which was the 91, 92 was kind of the year of my social transition, right as I was finishing up the PhD. And let's just say that being an out trans lesbian is not a great way to get a job as a history professor specializing in 18th and 19th century U.S. history and religion. It just was not a happening thing. And I spent about 15 years working mostly as a community-based historian, doing, documentary filmmaking, working in the nonprofit sector, being a freelance journalist, being an independent scholar, hustling for, grants or, precarious sessional work, teaching in the universities from time to time. But, I wasn't doing anything really that different in 2007 than I'd been doing in 1992. It's like the quality of the work, the kind of work that I was doing was the same. But I was sort of seen by the academic establishment as kind of an outsider. I was a community-based scholar, even though I was doing work that was getting published or editing anthologies or editing special issues of journals or what have you. And so when I was invited to apply for the Ruth Wynn Woodward Professorship and I got it, it was the thing that basically said to all of the other universities, I guess Susan Stryker got some street cred, but also now is seen as a viable, member of the professoriate. And I believe it as a direct consequence of holding that job, as soon as I could put my name and the word professor on a bit of university letterhead, that was the, called it the permissionator moment, that let other universities go Simon Fraser could hire her. It's we could, certainly do that. And, and then people started soliciting me for professorships. And it was being at Simon Fraser as the Ruth Wynn Woodward professor culminated in me having 3 inquiries for tenure track jobs in the next year. And being able to move into a permanent professor position. It's I was hired with tenure as an associate professor at Indiana University. It turned out, like I said, directly as a result of being at Simon Fraser. So I just thank the people who invited me to apply, and that was Helen Lung, in particular. Helen had been a friend who I had known through the film festival circuit. We'd actually met in Amsterdam. Yeah, Go ahead. No, I was just going to say that it's like, I think, I was on Helen's radar screen, and she saw me as somebody who, might be a good fit and be able to do some useful kinds of work within the department and at Simon Fraser. And she and Lara Campbell, I think kind of like worked behind the scenes to really promote my candidacy, for that job, and I just have undying gratitude for that.
Aw, that's like so. That's a great story, and it's also kind of an honor that SFU played a part in making you a legible academic.
Yeah, it really did,
So
and
that's
I
really
think I don't want to like tell tales out of school, so to speak, but I think that Helen and Lara had a sense of, like they were both assistant professors at that time, and I think they had a sense that the department reflected more of the sensibilities of an older sort of second wave feminist generation of the real pioneers of women's studies at Simon Fraser and in Vancouver and in Canada, and that as a younger generation of scholars, they were kind of hoping to like mix things up a little bit. I think they saw me as somebody who could sort of embody a next wave of scholarship, and that in their encouraging of me to apply and to do some of the work that I did in the year that I was at Simon Fraser, particularly organizing a really big, I think at that time, the largest academic conference on trans studies that had ever existed, as my public-facing work as the Ruth Woodward professor. I think that they were hoping that, I could kind of, blow things up a little bit and create space for some change. So I hope
okay.
I hope that my impact and influence and legacy was positive in that regard.